Welcome, everyone. We'll take another couple minutes to get everyone in here.
Hello.
Straight in. Cool, cool, cool.
Hello, hello.
There we go. I love it. And feel free, guys, if you do have questions. I know it was very silent last time, a lot of me talking. That's fine. But if you have a question, you can always type it in the chat if it's easier to unmute. Maybe there's a hand raise feature. I don't really know. You guys probably know Zoom better than me. But if that is for some reason easier, yeah, feel free. Or maybe just in the chat, be like, hey, I have a quick question. Can I unmute? That's fine too. But no reason I have to talk the whole time, especially now that you guys have done some work, gotten a little bit more comfortable with the SAT, things like that. So whatever works for me. I think we're pretty much everyone's here already. Okay, wow, that was quick. You guys are on time. Look at that. I love it. I was gonna put a little do now up there. Well, I guess I could skip that because yeah, seems like everyone's here. So might as well just go right into it then. Cool. Cool, cool. Oh, we got a lot of people background there. All right. Excellent. Well, then, yeah, let me just get right into it. We can get to our stuff for today. Remember, if you are trying to get to where the questions are, what you're going to want to do is log into the homework portal. That's seteletutoring.com/portal. Let me put that website here for everyone as well, seteletutoring.com/portal. If you are new, if you were not here for the first class, I think most of you at some point logged in. That's great. You might need to reset the password though if you never did log in and haven't gotten your password yet. But we'll just make sure you're working on that as I make some quick announcements, things like that. And once you are there, remember you can click this Television for Class button. You'll get to a page that looks like this. Some of you though, especially if you weren't here last time, might not have anything on this page. That's okay. Just it'll fill in a second when we're ready for it. But it is good to be back for another class. I hope everyone is well rested and ready to absorb some more SAT knowledge. And I know we do have a couple of new people, so welcome. Very good to have you. One thing, make sure that you watch the video for the first class at some point because we did go over some important strategies. Those are things that are essential. It's not like, oh, it's just some random topic. It's fundamental to how we're going to approach the entire SAT. So we want to make sure that we are not only learning those strategies, but consistently trying to use them. So plug points and equations, dumb summaries, those things we're talking about tonight too, but we want to make sure that those are second nature for what we're doing. And yes, for those of you who don't know who I am, Mike Settele, and this is our second of 8 classes. So long way to go, but also we're already going to be covering between last week and this week quite a bit. We are this time going to focus on essential memorization. So last time we did a lot of strategy stuff, a lot of new ways of approaching problems. This time around, we're going to do things that in many ways feel more traditional, more of the kind of stuff you would have learned in school, but with that SAT spin. And last time we did do a lot of math, so this time it'll be a little bit more reading, but we will do math at the end as well. So don't worry, we'll cover both subjects. And we'll start with things like grammar and transitions, but then end looking at lines and quadratics. And those are the big 4 memorization topics. Lots of questions are going to involve those things, so there's a lot to cover there. And reminder too, we've got this portal that I've been showing you where we can put scores and practice or do our homework and stuff. But also there's this portal as well where you can chat me. Some of you did that throughout the week. So you should have this chat button here. I'm not going to click it because it'll show some chats. But basically, if you have questions about a specific thing from the homework, a specific problem you're working on, general stuff about the strategies, general stuff about what the weeks ahead are going to be, literally anything related to SAT prep, feel free to chat me. Don't be shy. I'll check it usually once a day. So I'm not going to get back to you right away, but it'll be there. And this also has the link for the homework access. And that, again, brings us to here to this other portal for the homework. And it's very important that you go into this other portal because this is where you got to practice the stuff that we're going to be doing. So first of all, like anytime we have class, you can just go right in and click this button to get started for class. But then in between classes, remember that we are trying to learn these new strategies. And if you click this practice button, you're going to be able to organize basically based on our classes. So this step right here, step 1, the strategies thing of the study plan, that's what we did last week. So in an ideal world, everyone should have completed pretty much everything in this list here. This is the teacher account. So I haven't done it because I've already written it. But I saw a lot of people did pretty far down on this list, did a lot of stuff. Some people, I had some kind of empty kind of homework assignments, didn't really do much or anything at all. So make sure that you prioritize that. I would say, in addition to the class, you're really looking at like 3 hours a week, which I think during the summer is not asking a lot. And you don't need to do that 3 hours of practice all at once. Spread it out. Even some of these exercises, like this dumb summary one, you don't need to do all 10 questions at once. You can do like 3 in the morning while you're eating breakfast. You can do 1 while you're in line at Chipotle, right? Like you can spread it out. This works on your phone. So you don't need to have sit down for an hour and do all that work at once. So spread it out. You'll be happier. And remember though, too, a key part of the homework is watching the lesson so you know what to do for that particular exercise. And then if you get something wrong or you bookmark it and still get it right, make sure you watch the video explanation as well. So that way you learn from that mistake right away before you go on to the next question where, yeah, you'll probably be tested on the same thing. So that's very important. I cannot stress enough how much it is important that you practice and build new habits. It takes time to do that. But what you put in on this end is going to come back to you on the back end when you get your scores back. So remember, the biggest predictor of your SAT score is the effort you put in. Yes, natural ability helps, but this is a learnable test, just like anything else. So the more practice you get, the better you will be. That definitely works. So make sure you save time for it. I've taken the SAT many times. I'm still surprised by the questions when I get to the hard ones, but the strategies keep working. And the reason I'm so quick to deploy those strategies is I've taken the time to make them new habits. And that's the key. It's a new habit that takes time to put in. Any questions on logistics before we get into today's lesson here? If so, again, you can chat me privately. You can chat the group. If there's anything, let me know. But yeah, feel free to chat as much as needed. Cool. All right, then, like I said, today we're going to do a lot of the reading to start. So if you're on this page, this is a television page, I'm going to put a new question in there, and it should switch over. Let's see if it does. There we go. So it's one of these transition questions. Make it a little bigger. There we go. Let's move this out of the way. Put this on the top. Okay, on the side. Cool. Ooh. Ah. I will give that a shot. Feel free to give that a try. And I'll talk a little bit about strategies. Not a particularly hard question, but it's an important one. Okay, I don't know what I did here, but I can't see myself anymore. SAT expert, Zoom novice. Okay. Cool. And remember, you can cross out answer choices. You can bookmark it if you feel like you don't have confidence in your answer. And yeah, select something when you've got your answer. And just kind of do a little attendance so I can see who I'm waiting for on certain cases. Cool. Awesome. So this is one here where you're probably very naturally going to be using our dumb summary strategy. Whether you realize it or not, you're probably thinking about this and saying, well, I kind of understand what's going on, right? We have 2 sentences. We're trying to find the relationship between them. Activists are trying to remove coral bleaching chemicals from sunblocks, right? So that's a good thing, right? That sounds bad. If we're bleaching coral, it sounds bad. So let's not do that. Then the second part, without the blank, ignoring it for a second, many scientists say that may be too late. That sounds pretty bad. So how do we connect those dots, right? How do we go from positive to negative? I think you guys understood this pretty intuitively. We're going to use a word like however. And a however is basically, yeah, just a word that means but. So it fits perfectly, right? We're trying to remove coral bleaching chemicals from sunblocks, but many scientists say that it may be too late to save the reefs. So that one, again, intuition probably helps a lot here. But I do want to point out what we want to try to do for harder versions of this question, because even the easy one, if we can start to use the strategy in a more conscious way, we're going to start to be ready for when those ones get harder. And we want to dumb summarize the sentences. Connotations can help. But the key to these transition questions is we want to also dumb summarize the words themselves, because I just know for a fact most of you are not going through your day using words like furthermore. You might know what it means, but it's just not part of your daily vocabulary. And that's where things can get us in trouble because we're not going to have strong instincts for these words. So not only are we dumb summarizing the sentences, but we want to learn how to dumb summarize these transition words. And we already said, however, is basically a longer version of but. And that's not a particularly hard word, but that's where we want to go. Therefore is a harder version of so. Furthermore is a harder version of, and specifically is a harder version of for example. And right here, just in this one question, we have hit upon the four main categories of transition words. There are others, but these four are going to come up again and again. And rather than think of whether or not the word furthermore sounds good in these blanks, we can just dumb it down to this simpler version because you have good instincts for words like so and but, and for example, you use them every day without even realizing it. And then when we can tap into our dumb instincts, we're able to understand these relationships better. We don't need to define the words. We can more just feel them out. It's really helpful. I promise you, this is exactly how I do it. I would not be able to get some of these hardest transition questions right without using the strategy. So it's a really important one. And let's look at a harder example and see why. And again, if you have questions, you can either interrupt or you can chat me. But let's look at another question here. Boom. Oh, I love how well this works. All right, and I will write those categories here for us. So, and, but, so, and for example. Most things can be placed in those categories. So see if you have an intuition for these words as you're working through which ones go in which categories and how that might help us understand these sentences better. And there is a key strategy that we can also use here beyond just these dumb summary words. If you think you know what I'm talking about, some sort of way to kind of help us when we start using these dumb summaries, feel free to chat it to me. I'm curious if anyone knows already what I'm hinting at. It was in one or two of the lessons that we talked about or that you were supposed to do for homework. Some of you hopefully did them. There we go. Nice and big. Okay, good. Someone got it. Very nice. All right. I think we're kind of on the same page. So yeah. So if I were categorizing these, and these kinds of questions, you might even go to the answer choices first and start to categorize them. So if I were to do this, I know because I've studied and memorized things that moreover is a version of and. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Got this right. B and C, nevertheless and nonetheless, are both versions of the word but. Now, in other words, we'll leave aside. That kind of is just for now its own thing. It doesn't really fit in one of those categories. Awesome, thank you. And so basically, the key piece here is even if I had never seen the question, even if I'd never read the passage here, I know B and C have to be wrong because, well, if they mean the same thing, how could one of them be right and the other wrong? And I will say that there are going to be times where we do have two words that fit the same category, but maybe there's a slight enough difference on the hardest kind of questions where the difference matters and we can't eliminate them both. But it's so rare that I don't want you to worry about it. And I think the times where that exception happens, you'll be like, oh, wait, this is weird. Something weird is happening in this. The other choices don't make sense. So maybe now this is that exception. So for the most part, if you are able to correctly classify the words and you see that two of them mean the same thing, you've already doubled your odds of getting it right. And then it really just comes down to in other words versus moreover. And both choices are ones that you really wouldn't want to pick unless you were forced into it through process of elimination. And in this case, it turns out that moreover is the correct answer. And it's mostly because, in other words, this is a fact that I've gotten from analyzing hundreds of these, is basically the least likely correct answer. If I go through all the transition words that have been released and you tally up all the words that appear, in other words, is one of the most common answers, but is also one of the most likely to be incorrect. It sometimes is correct, but the reason it's usually wrong is it has a very specific meaning. We are saying the exact same thing in other words. And in this case, right, these are two different points. Claire Booth Luce's brand of feminism led by example as she routinely advanced in fields dominated by men, author, legislator, and diplomat. Okay, so she's leading in these fields that men usually dominate. As a philanthropist, she donated a large portion of her fortune to create a program that would promote the entry of women into the sciences and mathematics. That's clearly a related point, but it is not the same point. And that's really got to be the case in order for us to pick in other words. Unless they are really just repeating the same thing, we're not going to pick that choice. And is also, though, going to be our last resort. Because and is barely a transition. It barely does anything at all. It's just a word that kind of says, hey, here I'm moving on to something new. It doesn't really do much. And words like but, words like so, and for example, they do stuff. They move a sentence forward. They provide meaning. And so if you're ever choosing between a word that means and a word that has some other extra meaning, it's probably the one that does more and isn't necessarily wrong. It's just not a good transition when that's what we want to do is convey some meaning. But sometimes it's right because everything else is wrong. And that's what's going on here. We could honestly write these sentences without a transition at all and just start with as a philanthropist and nothing would change. It would mean the same thing. But I really want to stress how great it is that we can use these categories to our advantage. So for now, you're just learning this. But I will say this is a great thing in the homework portal here. So if I go to practice and I click essential memorization, which is this week's kind of topic, under quizzes, there's two really good quizzes in there. This one on the top, this is the best one. Top 20 transitions. These are the 20 transition words that through tons of looking at questions, I have determined mathematically are the ones that come up the most often. And it lets you categorize them usually into these four categories and, but, so, and for example, though there are a few like in other words that kind of are in their own category. So you'll see, but this is a great quiz to do it again and again until you've got those 20 down. And then when you get to that, there are definitely going to be transitions that come up less often. Many of them can still fit in those main four categories, but others are going to be weirder. And so this is a longer quiz, I believe. Yeah, there's 48 in there. So you could do 5 just to get your feet wet, but you could also just buckle down and try to do all 48. And they're quick questions, but these are really important since our goal for this week is to memorize the stuff that we know is going to appear on the test. At the very least, this quiz is really important. So definitely use it. But let's move on to another one here. And this one will still use some of those. So let's take a look. Awesome. So think about that. I got some comments to respond to here. So I'll do that while you guys are trying this one. And I know some of these words are new to you guys of categorizing them, but if you can throw them in a category, again, and, but, so, and for example. You guys are fast on these. Good. Okay. I'm not going to really talk about it. Let's just save time. I think I think everyone got it right. If not, well, sorry, but I'm pretty sure I'm seeing everyone getting it right here. And yeah, today, which isn't in these one of those categories, but it's a transition that has to do with time. So a lot of transitions end up having to do with time. As a result is a so, regardless is a but. Specifically, we saw that I think before is for example. And so if you were unsure, you could just throw them in there. And I feel like we have an intuitive sense that something like so doesn't make sense here. Art conservation once fell to the artists themselves who simply painted over faded areas. So restoration is more science than art, as modern chemistry plays a vital role. Why would that be a so? Why would restoration being more of a science than art be like an effect of what art conservation used to be? Like it doesn't make sense. We can just intuit that. So that's great. I think the for example also clearly doesn't fit. The second thing is not an example of the first. The but might be a little tempting because it does have that kind of contrast to it. But I think it's a good example of like, not only does today sound better, but we have some strong words in here, thinking back to our strategies from last time. They're emphasizing the concept of time. So it's not a surprise that we have this kind of time transition working for us there. So cool. All right. I think this one will be harder. So let's try this and then we'll move on to some grammar. Nope. I'm starting to see some smart crossouts here. Thinking strategically. I love it. And remember, you can bookmark questions here as well. So I think everyone got the last one right. That was great. I understand no bookmarks, but get in that habit of if you feel like you're picking something and you haven't proven your answer quickly and confidently, right? Those three ideas. Did I prove it? Was it quick? Was I confident? If you fall short in even one of those three, that's a good bookmark because it means you might get it right, but maybe there's something to learn. And for now, I mean, obviously, I'm just going to tell you, but when you're doing that practice on your own, those homeworks, you want to review those things. I know that listening to my videos sometimes can get a little tedious. I definitely watch myself on double speed, so you can feel free to do the same thing, speed me up to get through it faster. But the information in those is really important. And even if you got it right, if there's a way to get it right more confidently next time, that or more quickly next time, that's worth learning. I don't care if your score is 500, 600, 700, 750, 780 in a subject. If there's room to improve, a lot of it comes down to refining that process. So I see a couple of you took my advice here and bookmarked. That's good. Now I don't see a ton of careless mistakes, which is good because I would hope that most of you would recognize that however is a but word and also conversely. So there we go. Same thing, kill them off, right? It's probably not going to be one of those two. But then that leaves us with two words, two transition phrases, and that we don't really know very well. And so this is where the studying comes in, because one of these is, I don't know, just a little easier. And so I'll just reveal it here. The correct answer is C. Subsequently is a fancy way of saying next. You can almost see it in the word, right? The word sequence is in the word, right? Subsequently, right? And so sub kind of after, right? After the sequence. So it's built in there. I don't really care too much about the roots of words, but subsequently means next. And there's no ordering of time here, right? This is a time transition, and we're not trying to order events. But I wonder if some of you knew that and were picking it anyway because it was more familiar. And you got to watch yourself if you do that. You're picking an answer and kind of forcing something in. This goes for the vocab questions too. If you're doing it because it just feels safe, you want to make sure that you are careful and you're not just picking it because it feels safe. You're picking because you actually think it's right. And that might mean that sometimes through process elimination, you end up where we are here. We're picking something we don't quite know what it means, but it's all that's left. I do think, again, A is hard, but to this end, here we're talking about an end is like a goal. So this basically means something like to accomplish this goal. And I think when we put it that way, it's pretty clear, right? The conservationists recommend preserving and increasing pollinator habitats so that butterflies have more places to breed and lay their eggs. To accomplish this goal, a few organizations encourage people to plant the gardens that have the food the butterflies eat. So it makes sense, but I think that's an unusual definition of the word end, though you probably have heard it used that way before in something like the ends justify the means, right? The goals that we're pursuing justify the usually unpleasant means that we're using, the methods, the ways that we're going about trying to accomplish those goals. It's usually a way to get away with bad behavior. The ends justify the means. So that's what they mean here. The end is the goal. But, again, these are things that with practice, you might not learn and memorize every single transition word and phrase that you could see on the SAT. I mean, I've gone through every practice test. I've gone through every question. I know what was on older versions of the SAT, so I know what could show up. However, you just don't really know. There might be something that's a 1 in a million chance and it shows up on your test. But if we know the other three choices, because we've memorized those, it shouldn't matter too much if there's one that's different. It's the same with vocab. If you memorize more words and it gets you from two unknown choices to one, that still should be enough to answer the question. So we're all trying to just increase the odds of a right answer. Here's a good question here I'm going to share with everybody. Is there a way to bookmark after I reveal the answer? No, and that is intentional because the point of the bookmark is that you want to decide for yourself whether you think you're right before you know you're right. And that's so important for the SAT is you want to have that kind of second sense of like, okay, I think I've done the right work. And so I'm confident that I'm going to get this answer right versus, I can tell that I'm relying on instinct. I'm going by my feelings and what sounds right and feels right. But we don't want to do that. And we don't want to bookmark something after the fact and be like, oh, yeah, I saw this coming. I know now that I knew I was going to be wrong. The point is, you want to know, you want to have that feeling. You want to train yourself to have that feeling before you know for sure if you're right. Because if you do get something wrong that you didn't bookmark, that's a sign you fell for a trap or made a careless mistake. And those are problems that have their own solutions. Struggling on a hard question, knowing it's hard and then getting it wrong is not as bad as being confident in a wrong answer. So to be really clear about that, as this is such an important point, a wrong answer with no bookmark is the worst thing. A wrong answer with a bookmark, it's not great, but it's not that bad, right? You knew you were struggling and you got it wrong. But if you thought you were getting a right answer and you are surprised by that wrong answer, that's something to tackle. That's a problem. That's carelessness. That's traps. That's not thinking about the test the right way. So that's why I do not let you bookmark something. I can because I'm special, but you cannot bookmark something after you've answered it, or I've graded it rather. Cool. Really good question. Yes, very good question. Any others related to bookmarks? This might be a good time to emphasize those. There is a video, just to emphasize, strategies, exercises, bookmarks quiz. Comes with a nice video that I emphasize you watching beforehand. So one of the most important strategies for the SAT is knowing the bookmarks. Cool. All right, let's move on to grammar then.